The crop system that fed the Middle Ages. A deep dive into medieval agricultural ingenuity. Agriculture was not just a means of sustenance in the Middle Ages, it was the very foundation of civilization. Without a reliable food source, no castle could stand, no army could march, and no kingdom could thrive. One of the most innovative and widespread agricultural systems developed during this time was the open field system, which evolved into the highly effective three-field system. This method helped medieval Europe feed its growing population, survive famines, and shape the landscape of rural communities for centuries. The medieval crop system revolved around a careful balance of soil fertility, crop rotation, and communal labor. At its core was the three-field system, an agricultural arrangement that divided a village's arable land into three large sections. Each year, two of these sections would be planted with crops, typically one with winter wheat or rye and the other with spring crops such as barley, oats, peas, or beans, while the third field was left fallow. This rotation allowed nutrients to replenish in the soil, increasing long-term productivity and reducing the risks of soil exhaustion. The ingenuity of this system lay in its sustainable use of land. By not planting every field every year, farmers could rest the soil and make better use of available resources. The fallow field was often grazed by livestock, which further enriched the soil with manure. This system also provided a natural hedge against crop failure. If one field's crops failed due to drought or disease, the other field might still produce enough to sustain the community. Beyond the field rotation, other components contributed to the system's effectiveness. The use of heavy plows, especially the moldboard plow, enabled farmers to turn over thick clay soils of northern Europe, allowing cultivation of previously unworkable land. The introduction of the horse collar allowed horses to replace oxen in the fields, increasing efficiency and speed. These technological advances, combined with the crop system, supported an agricultural revolution that fueled economic growth and urbanization. Land management during the Middle Ages was deeply communal. Villages worked together under manorial systems, dividing the fields into narrow strips allocated to different peasant families. Each family cultivated their strips within the larger communal field, following the same crop rotation schedule. Cooperation was essential, as timing, labor, and decisions about what and when to plant were made collectively. This reinforced social cohesion and shared responsibility. Despite its advantages, the system was not without limitations. It required large amounts of land to be effective, with one-third always out of production. Additionally, reliance on predictable weather and absence of advanced pest control made harvests vulnerable. Even with these shortcomings, the crop system remained dominant across Europe until the agricultural innovations of the 18th century. The legacy of the medieval crop system is still visible in the landscapes of Europe. Many modern field boundaries trace back to the long, narrow strips of medieval open fields. More importantly, the principles of crop rotation and sustainable soil management that define this system continue to influence modern organic and regenerative farming practices. In essence, the medieval crop system was a cornerstone of life in the Middle Ages. It represented a community's knowledge, adaptability, and resilience in the face of environmental and social challenges. While modern agriculture has advanced in countless ways, the fundamental need for thoughtful stewardship of the land so deeply embedded in the medieval system remains just as vital today. 3. Economic impact and surplus management. The introduction of the three-field system led to a notable transformation, not just in the techniques of farming, but also in the rural economy. For the first time in centuries, many peasant households found themselves with a modest surplus. This excess grain could be sold at local markets, stored for bad harvest years, or even used to pay rent, taxes, or feudal dues. Surplus production, even if small, opened the door to more frequent trade in medieval Europe. Local markets began to thrive around manorial estates, and itinerant traders could offer salt, cloth, iron tools, or imported luxury goods in exchange for grain or livestock. The market economy, though in its early stages, was growing roots. As yields became more reliable and harvests more predictable, landlords and feudal lords also saw increased income from their domains. This wealth was often reinvested into land improvement projects, church construction, or even military campaigns. The church, a major landowner, directly benefited from the stability and growth of agricultural productivity. Monasteries, in particular, became centers of both spiritual and agricultural excellence, with monks developing advanced techniques for irrigation, soil management, and crop rotation. In some areas, the newfound prosperity encouraged lords to grant more freedoms to their serfs. Contracts became more flexible. Some peasants were allowed to sell portions of their land or pass property to heirs. The seeds of a more diversified rural economy, one not entirely dependent on subsistence farming, had been planted. But economic transformation also brought challenges. Wealth disparities grew between larger estates and marginal farmlands. Peasants on less fertile land or in areas without access to strong markets did not benefit equally from the system. Nevertheless, the three-field system helped stabilize rural life and created a basic framework that supported medieval economies for centuries. Chapter 4: Social Effects on Peasant Life and Community. The social life of medieval peasants was profoundly shaped by the rhythms of the three-field system. With more efficient food production, daily life became more organized around planting, harvesting, and maintenance schedules. Seasonal labor was no longer a frantic response to famine. It became a regulated cycle of responsibilities and communal effort. Villages operated almost like agricultural cooperatives. Land was divided among families, but certain tasks such as plowing, planting, or harvesting were often carried out collectively. Shared oxen teams, tools, and knowledge created tight-knit communities that depended heavily on one another. Agricultural calendars, often maintained by monasteries or parish priests, helped organize local economies and religious observances. Cultural life also evolved. More free time meant opportunities for leisure, festivals, and education, albeit limited. In some cases, literate clergy taught basic reading or scripture to peasant children. Church and community became even more entwined, with the annual cycle of planting and harvesting often mirroring the ecclesiastical calendar. Saints' feast days coincided with major agricultural milestones, further rooting Christian practice in daily life. For women, the system offered mixed outcomes. While they shared in the hard labor of farming, they also gained some status in managing household gardens, dairies, and food preservation. In some regions, widows or unmarried women could inherit small plots of land, contributing to a slow but significant shift in property relations. In short, the three-field system didn't just grow food, it grew communities. It nurtured cooperation, imposed social order, and allowed for the slow development of a peasant culture grounded in mutual reliance and seasonal rhythm. 5. Decline and legacy of the crop rotation system. By the 14th century, signs of strain began to show in the medieval agricultural system. Population growth had pushed the land to its limits, and there was little new territory left to cultivate. Overfarming, erosion, and soil depletion began to reduce productivity in some regions. The three-field system, though revolutionary in its time, was not infallible. Then came catastrophe. The Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, followed by the Black Death in the mid-14th century, decimated Europe's population. With fewer laborers, many fields were left fallow by necessity. Entire villages were abandoned, and land values plummeted. In this new context, the intensive rotation system lost some of its relevance. Landowners began to consolidate holdings and experiment with different models of agriculture. In parts of England, for example, sheep farming began to replace grain production, driven by the profitability of wool in emerging markets. Elsewhere, wealthier lords adopted more modern methods of enclosure and privatized farming. Despite these changes, the legacy of the three-field system endured. It had laid the foundation for organized, sustainable agriculture in Europe. Its structure taught generations how to manage soil fertility, organize labor, and collaborate across families and feudal classes. Elements of the system, especially the idea of crop rotation, would later inspire innovations during the agricultural revolution of the 17th and 18th centuries. Today, historians look back at the three-field system not merely as a technique, but as a turning point in human survival. In an era when a single bad harvest could spell death, this system offered hope, balance, and continuity. Its rhythms shaped the culture, religion, economy, and identity of medieval Europe, and its lessons still echo through the furrows of modern farming. Three-field system in the Middle Ages. In the heart of medieval Europe, a silent revolution unfolded across the vast rural landscapes. This revolution was not political, nor was it fought with swords or shields. Instead, it was agricultural, embodied in what became known as the three-field system, Unlike its simpler predecessor, the two-field system, this newer strategy offered a more sustainable and efficient method of farming that transformed food production for centuries. Implemented widely between the 8th and 13th centuries, especially in northern and western Europe, the three-field system helped sustain growing populations, support expanding economies, and fuel the urbanization that would eventually reshape the continent. While it may seem humble compared to grand castles or epic battles, this advancement was a cornerstone of medieval innovation that shaped everyday life as powerfully as any royal decree. The system was simple in design, but ingenious in its implications. A manor's farmland was divided into 3 large fields. Each year, one field was sown with a winter crop such as wheat or rye, the second with a spring crop like barley, oats, or legumes, and the third was left fallow and planted to recover its fertility. These fields rotated their roles each year. This meant that, unlike the two-field system, where half the land was unproductive at any given time, the three-field system kept 2/3 of the land under cultivation. It was a method that increased yield without depleting the soil, promoting healthier harvests and contributing to a more stable food supply. This innovation had a ripple effect. With more food available, the population could grow, and healthier peasants were more productive in both the fields and their communities. This rotation technique had far-reaching ecological and economic benefits. Leaving a field fallow gave the soil time to regenerate its nutrients naturally through exposure to air, decomposition of organic material, and even grazing by animals whose manure enriched the earth. Planting legumes such as beans and peas in the spring crop field helped fix nitrogen into the soil, naturally replenishing essential nutrients. These strategies improved the structure and health of the soil, minimized the risk of famines, and ensured that each year's harvest did not rely entirely on a single season's weather conditions. This diversity in crop timing and type provided a buffer against the risks posed by drought, pests, or disease, making the rural economy more resilient. The labor force also benefited. Unlike rigid monoculture systems that demanded intensive labor in short time frames, the three-field system allowed for more staggered agricultural work. This distribution of tasks across seasons made labor more manageable and efficient for serfs and peasants. They could devote appropriate time to plowing, sowing, harvesting, and maintaining the land without being overwhelmed during any single part of the year. Moreover, the increased productivity of the land meant that surpluses became more common. These surpluses could be sold in growing market towns or used to support the feudal lords, monasteries, or military obligations without putting the peasant population at risk of starvation. Beyond agriculture, the system indirectly spurred technological innovation and social transformation. With more predictable food supplies, medieval society began to evolve. Lords could invest in tools like the heavy plow, which was especially useful in northern Europe's heavy clay soils. Horses, outfitted with improved harnesses, began to replace oxen, increasing efficiency. Villages grew around fertile lands, and monasteries became centers of both spiritual and agricultural knowledge, refining and spreading the system further. These shifts helped lay the groundwork for the agricultural revolution that would come centuries later. However, it is important to note that the three-field system wasn't universal across all of Europe. Its effectiveness was most visible in regions with fertile soils and temperate climates. In Mediterranean areas or in mountainous regions where terrain or climate posed challenges, other systems remained more prevalent. Still, the influence of the three-field system reached far beyond its immediate impact. It contributed to a vision of land management that was methodical, respectful of natural cycles, and deeply integrated into the social structure of feudalism. It elevated farming from subsistence to sustainability, proving that thoughtful organization could outmatch brute force in the quest for prosperity. Ultimately, the three-field system is more than just an old agricultural method. It stands as a testament to medieval ingenuity, a quiet revolution in the fields that enabled a civilization to grow and endure. By maximizing resources, adapting to nature, and fostering community resilience, this system helped write the forgotten history of Europe's survival and progress.